All right. Welcome, everyone. It's great to have you with us today for kickstarting your college search process for the Junior Bootcamp Series. We are delighted to have you. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. We're waiting just for a few more people to make their way through the technical universe, but we'll get started doing introductions in just a minute. So thanks for being here, and you're in the right spot, and we can't wait to connect with you a little bit more in the next couple of minutes. All right. Oh, that was very effective. A bunch of you just made it through. That's great. Well, welcome again, everyone. We're going to get started with introductions so you know who's here today and who your resources are. I can get started. My name is Megan Rhodes, and I'm an Associate Director of Admission here at Colorado College. And my territories are Washington, Oregon, New Hampshire, Maine, Vermont, as well as Asia, Europe, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the Middle East. So I'm now going to turn it over to my terrific colleague, Jenna, who is our co-presenter today. Jenna, take it away.
Hi, everyone. It's so wonderful to see all these smiling faces. My name's Jenna Holt. I'm an Assistant Director of Admission, and I have several states in the Midwest, including Missouri, Minnesota, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska. I also have some counties in Colorado and South Dakota and North Dakota, and I manage our communications at CC. And I also want to introduce who's going to be managing the chat today. That's Melissa Guffey. If you want to say a little something about yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Melissa Guffey. I'm our lead coordinator for operations and events. If you have any questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat. And I'm here to support all of you. Nice to see all of you. And I'm going to let Cody, our other staff member and CC alum, introduce himself.
Hey, everybody. My name is Cody Leong. I'm an admission counselor here in the Office of Admission, and my territory, I work in Nevada, New Mexico, and Arizona, so more of the Southwest. And I'm also here to support you guys in any way that you can. So if you have any questions that you think could be better answered from the perspective of a former CC student, please feel free to ask them, and we'll do our best to help you guys in any way we can.
Perfect. Thanks all. So now you know our whole gang here. This is our crew. We're delighted to be with you today. And let's get started. So we're going to help you kickstart your college search, kickstarting our own Junior Bootcamp Series today. So let's get started. Here we go. So these are the items we wanted to cover with you today. So starting off as juniors and kicking off your college search process, we're going to go over some tips, some recommendations, some resources. So we'll go over that together. And then we're going to deep dive a little bit into CC specifically, giving you a nice broad introduction to Colorado College in general. And then we'll conclude with what's ahead in our bootcamp series. So the nice thing is that you all have this information in your email, but we'll go over that with you really quickly and give you some recommendations for next steps from here. So this is what we'll cover together today. All right. So it's funny, the first slide, of course, is an overwhelmed slide, but I think in the spirit of remembering these days, we know it can be very overwhelming, right? There's so many colleges and there's so many universities and there's so many schools. But that's also really what's so wonderful about the college search process is that you do have so many options. And so what's nice about that, I think, just in terms of framing context, is that I know it's very nerve-wracking, of course, trying to figure out where you're going to land. Where am I going to get in? Can I get into these different places? But I think what's good to know in this beginnings process is that with over 4,000 colleges and universities in the United States, the average acceptance rate is 65%, Right. So out of all of those thousands of higher education institutions, that's a pretty nice, I think, a pretty nice frame of reference, 65%. There's only 73 schools in the entire country that have less than 20% acceptance rate. So whenever I do these types of presentations, I think it can be helpful to keep in mind that that super level of selective schools, the highly selective admission schools, are less than 100 out of over 4,000 schools in the country, right? So I hope that's reassuring to you, is that the majority, the vast majority, in fact, of those 4,000 schools and universities have a very nice 65% or higher acceptance rate. So that's, I think, a good foundation to start from. All right. Now, if you have a pen or a pencil handy, or if you want to take some notes on your computer, we thought getting started with a little bit of a participation exercise here. Getting started in terms of your own self-reflection. What is the most important to you? So I think this is a really good place to start. So thinking about what are your values? Starting big again, deal breakers, size. Can you imagine going to a flagship university with 60,000 students? Are you worried about that? Does that excite you? Do you want to have very close relationships with your professors? Do you want the excitement of always finding, lots of different kinds of people and being kind of lost in the shuffle sometimes of all of the opportunities that come with that? Location, of course, another really big part of this process. Location, are you a person that is really city-centric? Are you a person that's open to a different kind of environment than you're familiar with? Are you open to living in a different region of the country that you've never been to before? And then, of course, programs. Thinking about what kind of programs would be make or break for you. Are you really interested in being a nurse? Some schools have really strong nursing programs. Some schools don't have nursing programs. So making sure that programs that you're really interested in pursuing would be available. The location is something that you'd be really excited about. The size. These are all really good places to start. And that's similar in terms of considering your academic fit. So for instance, if you're somebody who is undecided, maybe you have a lot of ideas, you're interested in multiple academic areas, but you can't really pinpoint one definitively. Maybe a liberal arts college could be a really good fit for you, because you don't have to have it all planned out. You don't have to apply to a specific program. You actually come to college and then you figure it all out once you get there through getting exposed to these different academic areas and these different programs and so forth. So thinking about that, kind of where you are in your academic journey. Some people have known since they're 5 years old, they want to be a doctor, they want to be a lawyer, they want to be an engineer. Some people are more open to changing their minds and wanting to have exposure to different areas. So that academic fit, thinking about that as well can be really helpful. All right. So what are some tools and resources to go about finding these schools and these places that could be a good fit for you? So here are a few that we recommend. For instance, niche.com, score.com, Princeton Review. Jenna and I were talking about how we used that back in our day. But these are really great resources. Score, of course, many of your schools are already using Score. So that database is already built into what your college counselor may be referencing and using. And speaking of your college counselor, that is really such a tremendous resource, and maybe one of the best starting resources is making a visit with your counselor and getting some insights and recommendations from them, because as college admission staff, we work very closely with counselors. We do a lot of programs. We're actually doing a webinar this week for counselors. So from all over the country. So it's a really great opportunity for your counselors are getting a lot of information from us directly. And they're also, of course, very experienced in working with you and making sure that you're getting the best resources. And then these next two are specific to the colleges that you're looking at. So one of the benefits or kind of unforeseen advantages of the pandemic is that virtual visits have become much more prevalent. So including us, we've really scaled up considerably what we offer to students online. So thinking about where we were at this time last year versus where we are now it's gone up exponentially. So if you wanted to do like a one-on-one tour, for instance, you could do that. If you want to do a one-on-one conversation, you could do that. If you wanted to do an interview, you could do that. If you wanted to meet with an admissions staff member, you can do that. So there's a lot of great opportunities to connect with the community of the schools that you're looking at. And I think that's something that has become so much more accessible now because we are in the online world. So really taking advantage of that and knowing that there's a lot of students, staff, and faculty members who are really excited to share the specific college community with you. Okay, so we are now at a point where we can talk a little bit about the admission process itself and give you kind of an overview of what to expect and what it can generally entail. So this is actually probably most specific to a liberal arts college admission process. So I've worked at a few different ones, and I would say that this really holds in terms of its applicability to different liberal arts settings. And some of these things, if you're applying to like a large flagship university, it might be a little bit different. It's like some schools that are really, really large aren't able to offer interviews, for instance. But I would say, generally speaking, everything on this screen is a really nice representation of a holistic college admission experience. So let's start with the application. So many schools use the common application. That is the most common, is like our little admission joke. But of course, the coalition application has become more widely used in recent years, as well as the QuestBridge application for schools that are partnered with the QuestBridge organization. So those three different application platforms are probably the most prevalent. And then once you go into the academics testing area, this is something that we wanted to talk about because there's a little bit of nuance from school to school here. Some schools, for instance, have moved into a test optional environment, especially in the pandemic, not wanting students to have to risk the associated health and safety risks that come with going into another testing facility or flying to one, for instance. And CC was actually test optional last year before COVID. And we wanted to talk a little bit about this for a moment because I know some students are a little hesitant when they hear school is test optional. I know I've talked to students and some counselors who think, gosh, they don't really believe that test optional means test optional, but it really is just that. So taking a step back, test optional means that if you want to submit your scores, if you think that they represent your skills and abilities as a student, then you are recommended to submit those scores. If you do not think your test scores represent your abilities and skills as a student, you do not have to submit those scores. And also, if you just didn't get to them in the pandemic, if you aren't able to get testing, that's also a great reason not to have to submit scores as well. One other thing I'd mention that's helpful as to if you are looking at a test optional school is to look at their testing median markers on their website, because even though if your skills and abilities, if you feel like you're like, I think this represents me, I'm not sure, it'll be really helpful to look at where you stand with the school's median for testing. And that can be very informative as well about whether or not you should submit those scores. But please do trust us. It really does mean optional, and there's no hidden hooks to that at all. Because in fact, for many schools, and CC is one of those schools, the academic piece is the most important. So the academics have the most weight in the process. And when we're looking at your academics, we're looking at you within the context of your high school specifically. So we'll never compare you to students within different schools with different programs programs, different grade scales, different curricula. We would only look at you within the context of your high school. We are able to ascertain what kind of courses are available for you to take, and what the most advanced curriculum may be relative to your school environment. And all that information is on what's called the school profile, which is part of your application that comes from your school. And so we also travel. Like in the beginning, Jenna and I introduced the territories we manage. And so we've worked with schools for many years, getting to know your school very well on the ground and have a really good understanding of the academics and the policies and procedures of your individual school. So please know that all of that is taken into account when we're looking at your high school transcript. All right. Now, in terms of writing, some schools do offer a supplement to the main application. And so I know it's confusing because with the Common App, Coalition, QuestBridge, it can be so easy to, of course, apply to many, many schools. And then it's all of a sudden, wait, why is there this other essay? And my tip for you here would be that if a school is offering a supplement, to spend some time on it, because the school is looking at that supplement carefully, right? Because they want to see if we're a good fit for you and if you're a good fit for us. And the supplement is a really great platform to allow that understanding to happen. So they tend to be pretty short, which is good news. But my advice to you is to make sure that you're being reflective and detailed and specific to the individual school that you're applying for. Because Jenna and Melissa and Cody and I can tell you every year there's supplements, unfortunately, that are really detrimental to a student's application. So what would be a detrimental example? A detrimental example would be copying and pasting from another school's supplement, right? So if you're writing for us this year, we only had one essay, for instance. It was, why are you applying to CC? And if you're mentioning Wellesley throughout this essay, that's a bit of a bummer, right? Because how serious do you think that's signaling that the student is to us, right? And so that's something that we see, unfortunately, every year. I don't think any of you would do that, but I do want to mention that just in case. And then also sometimes students will write maybe like a one-sentence answer, like, oh, I like the block plan and I like to ski and it seems cool. So the problem with that is, how long did that take to write? Maybe not that long, right? So making sure that even if the essays are short, that you are making them substantive and you are reflecting on that fit that you have for that school and really putting some effort into your response will be very, very successful for a supplemental essay. In terms of activities and leadership, what schools are looking for is not a specific magic list of being a vice president or a president of every club, of every experience, but we actually have that section there just so we can get to know you better, so we can get a better understanding of what your interests are outside of the classroom with that really elusive time that you have outside of the classroom. And that can mean different things for different people, right? So for some people, being a leader means taking care of younger brothers, younger sisters at home. That can mean helping with household responsibilities. That can mean working a part-time job. So leadership and activities mean a lot of different things depending on your personal circumstances. And there's no right or wrong way to have that experience. And I think the last thing I'd say, especially with, the pandemic context, is we know they're going to look really different, right? We know that it's going to be your ability to even engage in school activities has been kind of turned upside down. So our director was actually quoted in the Wall Street Journal talking about this. And he said, if your activities and leadership is eating Captain Crunch in your basement, watching movies or playing video games, we get it. That was us too this year. So, self-care is all about it. We're all about it. And so I think then they actually ended the article on that on that quote. So I think it's really good to know that we're taking that into consideration, and we really just want to get to know you more and what your background is in that sense. And then for letters of recommendation and the counselor evaluation, we asked for 2 academic letters of recommendation. So academic solids. So that's English, history, science, math, and foreign language. And then a counselor evaluation. If you don't have a counselor, you can have a teacher write this, but the counselor evaluation is one it's a bit more broad. So they kind of give you a more holistic evaluation and talk about like your activities, your life outside of school, whereas a teacher recommendation really narrows in on your performance within a specific academic subject. And advice here is to ask your recommenders early, trying to make sure you give them plenty of time. And of course, sometimes of the 2 academic solids, it can be helpful maybe to have the class that you had been challenged the most. Maybe it's the lowest grade on your transcript. And that can be helpful because it may give us some context that we wouldn't have otherwise through that recommendation. So that teacher, for example, might be able to highlight, this student worked so hard and saw me after class every week, but got brought down by this nasty exam that was 25% or 30% of their grade, some things like that, for instance. So you don't have to do that, but just a thought about what could be helpful depending on your academic journey and your experience. And I think the last thing I'd mention here is that it's also helpful to make sure you have a teacher that's known you in your latter half of high school, right? Because thinking about your journey and how much you've evolved as a student, back in those days, you were a 9th grader. Wow, huh? So thinking about that arc, thinking about where you are now, where you're going, it's great to have a teacher that knows you like throughout that journey and not just in the earlier stages. All right. And the last item we have here is the interview. You'll find like many colleges recommend, but do not require interviews. And as we said earlier, some schools may not even offer or have the ability to offer interviews depending on the size of the institution. But CC is one of those colleges that can recommend, but does not require. And it's really the neat thing about the interview is it's like a 2-way interview, right? You can interview your interviewer and find out questions that you cannot find the answers to on the website. So it's a really great opportunity to engage one-on-one through your personal outlets, your personal prism of your values and experiences and how that would translate into that specific school that you're looking at. So we are going to do a separate boot camp series on the interview. So definitely stay tuned. I think that's actually our next program. So we'll go into much more detail and recommendations about that. But something that is really just meant to be as a resource for you, just as much as it is for the school to get to know you. It's your ability to get to know the school as well. Financial aid, very important to talk about, right? I know many of us could not have gone to school without financial aid. So we did want to spend a few minutes speaking to this process and what it looks like. So financial aid is going to look a little different from each school you look at, but if they are in federal compliance, every school that has financial aid will have a net price calculator on their website. And a net price calculator is a very handy resource because it gives you an estimate for what your financial aid package could look like. So it's a great opportunity to sit down with a parent or guardian to go over, because there'll be some questions about assets that you may not, for instance, that you may not be familiar with. But what's great about this tool is that you will have a sense of what your financial aid package will look like after you complete it. And our financial aid director really backs its accuracy as a resource. So she really recommends it as well. And again, on every financial aid website, definitely look for the net price calculator. The two major forms for CC and for many colleges are the FAFSA and the CSS profile. The FAFSA is actually it's a federal form that's the most probably widely used form. And then the CSS profile kind of varies a little bit from school to school. Some schools use the CSS profile, some schools don't. But what you can think about for now is with the FAFSA, it's like black and white, very basic questions, very basic financial aid document. And then the CSS profile, or the whichever form that this particular schools may be using that you're looking at, that's where things get a little bit more gray. It gets a little bit more granular, a little bit more specific. So questions that get a little bit more into that zone that's not so like black and white and basic. But definitely know that we have, any school you're looking at will have great resources for you to get help for filling out these forms as well. So reaching out to individual financial aid websites, I definitely did that for schools that I was looking at, because it's a bit of a minefield trying to make sure that you're doing the forms correctly and you're getting them in on time. And that's really the most important piece that I could leave you here with, is making sure that if you do have questions, if you're unsure, reach out and get help so you can get those forms accurately and on time. And then you don't have to worry about missing financial aid deadlines, because that's when things can really turn around for you. So at CC, we are actually a school that meets full demonstrated need, which means if you submit these forms accurately and on time, the college will meet 100% of your need as demonstrated by these forms. That's huge. That's a really big deal, right? We're only, I think, about 66 schools in the country meet full demonstrated need. So I think the good thing to know about this process when you're researching schools and researching financial aid, it can be a really great question, is to ask, do you meet full demonstrated need, or do you gap students? Gapping occurs when you apply for financial aid and you need X amount, but the school gives you Y amount, and then there's this resulting gap between X and Y, and then you have to try and make up for that difference with loans, right? So getting a sense of meaningful demonstrated need versus loans, how much loans, and all of that is a really good thing to ask financial aid offices that you're applying for, and getting a good sense of what their packages entail and how their packaging process works. Another great thing to ask financial aid offices, and this is where it also varies a bit from school to school, is their merit scholarships and their athletic scholarships. So merit scholarships are very interesting because some schools have different approaches to them than other schools. So like at CC, for instance, we have some merit scholarships that you don't even have to apply to. When you submit your application to CC, you're automatically eligible for these merit scholarships. And about 5% of our incoming students receive one of these merit scholarships in the amount of $5,000 to $10,000 each year. There are also scholarships that you would apply for. So we have like scholarships in the sciences, like in the Barnes, for instance. And then we have merit scholarships that are based specifically in Colorado for Coloradans, because they're tied to Colorado-based foundations. So you can see how we have some general ones and then we have some specific ones. And schools are similar. They'll have general ones and more specific to the school and the institution. So definitely research that, and because there is some variance like we were discussing. And then the other piece that can be a bit of a little bit of variety is the Division I status of the school. So if you're a star athlete, for instance, and you're looking to play at the Division I level, that's like the highest of the three levels. That's like ESPN. That's like when you're watching sports teams on TV. That is when you can receive merit aid through for the athletics team that you're playing on. So CC has 2 Division I sports teams. That's men's ice hockey and women's soccer. And then the rest of our teams are at the D3 level. So it's a little interesting because we have both. Some schools have D1, D2, D3, but just researching that. And so if you are getting in touch with the coach and making sure that you could be in such consideration, that's another opportunity to receive funding is through the Division I programming. Division I is the only division that will offer funding through the NCAA. Okay.
I will take over from here, Megan.
Anna?
And I am already seeing some really good questions in the chat. That's amazing. If Melissa has not answered them, don't worry. We will answer those at the end of our presentation today. So I just want to dive in a little bit to Colorado College specifically. As you know, we're located in Colorado, in southern Colorado, as you can see here on this map. And to dive in a little bit deeper into our location and our background, we were founded in 1874. This is a picture of our Tut Library. It's a fully carbon neutral library, the first one in the Rocky Mountains. And that's a little bit of the town around us. And we are located in a very large metropolitan area. Colorado Springs is about 700,000 people. Oh my gosh, I can't. There it goes. Within the metropolitan area. And we also have a beautiful downtown. We have tons of things to do, internships in the summer and jobs and all of those things within the area. But we also have our beautiful mountains. Pikes Peak is right behind us. It's that tall mountain peak right there. You can see it's one of 54 14ers in the state of Colorado. So a 14er is a mountain peak that is over 14,000 feet tall. And then we're also only about an hour and a half drive to Denver. So you can always get your fix of outdoors and city and culture all in one day at CC. And at CC, I also want to mention, what our demographics are. And this should be a question that you ask yourself as you're evaluating colleges. If you're an international student, you may want to look for a large international population. If you're first gen, you want to make sure that they have the right resources for you. Every year at CC, we get more first gen and more students of color. So we're very happy with those numbers and they go up constantly. We're also looking for students all across the country. As you can see, we're getting a lot more students from the South than we used to. And so that's just something that we're working to grow. But this information should be on any college that you, on any website that you check, and you should always, kind of find out these details before you apply. And then a little bit more about CC in particular. So we are pretty unique in our class size. 16 is the maximum 25 is the maximum unless you have 2 professors, in which case you might have 32 students in your class, but the average class is 16. And then we have that 10-to-1 student to faculty ratio. So like Megan was saying earlier, if you want to go to a 60,000 person school, CC may not be the right place for you. We've only got about 2,200 students here on campus. And of those 2,200, 96% are coming back to CC and, getting a degree and graduating. And, we just love to see those high numbers. Also, this number of professors with a terminal degree means that 94% of the professors who teach your classes, because we have no TAs here at CC, 94% of them have the terminal degree. So that's a PhD, JD, MD, whatever that may be for their field of study. So we have some really impressive people teaching you guys. Then we have over 80 majors and minors. This is all going to be found on our website, and I encourage you to go check it out. Some of the most popular ones at CC are political science, econ, and biology. Those are our top 3. But we also are very well known for our environmental science program, mainly because of our location and our sustainability on campus. We are fully carbon neutral all across campus. And we also have a couple of fun hybrid majors, such as international political economy. So if you have, sort of diverging interests, you love, politics, but you also are a big history fan or classics, you can combine those three majors in some way, shape, or form at CC. So we have a bunch of those available on our website, and they're pretty popular, getting more popular every year. We also have some fun minors, and Southwest Studies, we are the only small liberal arts school in the country to offer a fully developed Southwest Studies program. At CC, you should also know, and at most schools, they are going to have some general requirements. So these are going to be classes that you are required to complete outside of your major before you graduate. At CC, one of the most important ones is the first year program. So that's the first 2 classes that you take at CC. I'll explain in just a minute, but since we're on the block plan, that's going to be your first 7 weeks at CC. Essentially, these 2 classes, they're going to really help you dive into the writing, the research, the analytical side of CC. They're going to make sure that you're up to the standards and you know how the block plan works. Because as I'm about to explain, CC is one of only 2 schools in the nation that is on this really funky class schedule plan that you won't see anywhere else except Cornell College in Iowa. But essentially, we move really quickly, and we don't want anyone to be left behind. So that's what the first year program is designed to help our students. And then there's going to be classes across other disciplines. Just because you're a science major doesn't mean you'll never step foot in an English classroom, right? Depending on the school you're going to, you're going to have requirements across the whole campus. And then at CC, at least we have 32 units to graduate. So that's 8 units every year. We also have some really fun pre-professional programs. This is something you should, if you're interested in becoming a doctor, you should see, does your school of interest have a pre-health program? At CC, we have pre-med, we have pre-dentistry, pre-PA, we have pre-nursing, we have all sorts of pre-vet, right? We have everything that you could want in the pre-health field. So make sure when you're doing your research that your career, if you already know that, is kind of linked to your undergrad of some sort. Moving on to the block plan. So as I just briefly mentioned, we have this really funky schedule going on. This is what your year is going to look like at CC. This is going to be your fall semester. So you have 4 classes each semester, right? We start at the same time, mid-August, and we end around the same time, mid-May. So you still have a winter break. You still get a summer for 3 months off. You still have, all of those normal breaks built in, but we have some extra breaks in here as well. Essentially, on the block plan, you're going to take 1 class for 3.5 weeks, right? So when you're in a psych class, Psych 101, for example, you're not in Psych 101 at 10 to 11 a.m. and then in the afternoon, you have to take your French literature class. No, you are only taking 1 class at a time at CC. That way you can fully dive in and really focus on the material. And it's such a, valuable way to learn and to grow as a student because you don't have distractions, right? You're able to, as we like to say, scuba dive into the material as opposed to just snorkeling on the surface. So you get a lot more in depth there. And here's just an example of a couple classes on the block plan. So as I mentioned, your first year program is going to be the first 2 classes that you take at CC. And so here's one example from a couple years ago of students who went to one of our off-campus sites and actually helped build the whatever those things are called on the sun. Oh my gosh, I'm losing my mind here. But you know what I mean. You can see it in the photo. Anyway, they made our Baca campus more sustainable. And so as I was saying, each class is 3.5 weeks long. Let me go into that a little bit further. You have class for 3 hours a day, right? So it's not going to be a 1-hour class for 3.5 weeks. That's not going to be enough time. You have 3 hours a day, typically from 9 a.m. to noon. Right. But the class can vary based on your professor's needs. And if you have a science class, there may be a lab in the afternoon that you may have to come back to for 1 to 2 hours. So keep that in mind. And we do anticipate about 5 hours of homework on the block plan. So overall, it evens out to be about the same amount of work as at a semester school when you're taking 3 or 4 classes at the same time. But with CC, you're only focused on is that 1 class, and you get to really, dive into that to that sustainability class or that higher ed economics class or whatever it might be for that block. So if you have more questions about the block plan, please put those in the chat. I'm going to keep moving. So one of the things that is a wonderful kind of side effect of the block plan is that we get to have breaks in between each class, right? Because you can't go from class to class and just be totally burnt out, right? We don't want that for our students. So on the last Wednesday of your class, the fourth Wednesday, that's going to be your last day. So at noon, when that class ends or whenever it ends, you have until the following Monday, so 4.5 days with no academic requirements. This is when our students get out there and really experience Colorado. They might do an outdoor education trip, which is a really big club on our campus. They might visit national parks. They might take a career center trip to San Francisco and go visit some potential employers. They might go to Costa Rica, right? There's all sorts of opportunities for growth and learning and getting out there and helping your community during the block breaks. So that's a really fun little facet of CC, which is definitely not similar, and you won't find it at other colleges. Here, we have study abroad at CC. We also have, so those are going to be normal programs, typically a semester or a year long, and they're going to be all around the world. We have about 120 programs that are approved off-campus programs for CC. So as long as you go on an approved program, you'll bring those credits and they'll transfer back to CC. No problem at all. We also at CC, because we're on the block plan, we get to have blocks abroad as well. So if you're a really busy athlete, you're on our hockey team, or you just love being on campus and you don't want to go abroad for a semester or a year, we have these options to go abroad for 1 block or 2 blocks, right? So here's a couple example of those. So our most popular class is going to Greece and sailing around on a sailboat for 3.5 weeks while you read Odysseus. So definitely a fun take on that, maybe a little bit dry Greek poem. But we have classes all over the world, and they're, based maybe in another language, but maybe they're based in English. Maybe they're, science block, econ block, anything you could want, we have it abroad. All right. Moving on. Another question you should ask yourself when you're looking at colleges is, where do these students go, right? What are the alumni doing 5 years, 10 years down the road, right? Because if you want to be a doctor, or you want to get a PhD eventually, or you want to be a CEO, you want to know that there's other people from that same school who are doing that as well. So at CC, here's some outcomes from the class of 2019. So they've only had about 1.5 years to, figure out what they're doing with their lives, but so far they're doing pretty well. 82% accepted a job offer right outside of college, whereas 10% went on to grad school. At CC, that's pretty common because usually after 4 years on the block plan, you're a little burnt out and you're ready to just take a breath, get some work experience. And then in about 5 years, they do tend to go back to school at higher rates. But here's some fun cities and facts about where they're working. We have students at the U.S. Olympic Committee in Denver. About to sneeze. We have students who work at HBO, at the United Nations Development Program, at the Smithsonian. We have students all over the world, and we're really, really proud of them. And yes. And last but not least for me is some facts about our admission and financial aid. And so as Megan said, we do meet 100% of demonstrated need, and those materials are due at the same time as admission. So here are our deadlines right here. Keep those in mind as if you are applying for admission and for financial aid, it's going to be the exact same. For us, the most important thing to know is binding versus non-binding, right? So a binding decision plan means that you are proposing to CC, right? You're getting down on one knee and you've got a ring in your hand. And if we accept that proposal, if we admit you to CC, you're coming, right? We're going to put that ring on. You're going to be here for 4 years. You're not applying early decision to other schools. You're not shopping your marriage proposals around, right? You're committed to CC. So that's a pretty big decision to make. If we are your first choice, you should absolutely 100% go binding admission at CC. There's no reason not to. If we're your first choice, you'd be so excited to get in. If we're your second choice, your fifth choice, your 12th choice, if you're planning to apply, but we're not at the top of your list, I highly recommend early action. Early action is going to be the November 1st deadline. It is non-binding. So you're not proposing to us. You're just dating around, right? You're allowed to do that with as many colleges as you want. And for November 1st, it's really nice because you get your decision by around mid-December, around the 15th of December. So then you have until May 1st to commit to a college, right? So you can get your admission and financial aid package from CC, because we give you both of those at the same time. And then you'll be able to compare that to all the other amazing offers that you're going to get from other schools. And you're going to have months and months to decide. Whereas if you do regular action, not only is our admit rate a little bit lower for that one, but it's also going to be, you won't get your decision till mid-March. And you have about a month and a half to really make the decision for where you'll be the next 4 years. So we highly, highly recommend either a binding decision or early action. Any questions on there, we will please put them in the chat and I will be happy to answer. But I think I'm about to pass it back to Megan Rhodes to finish us off.
All right. Thanks, Jenna. Thanks for that great overview of CC. And we're now at the end of our presentation. So we wanted to point out some future resources for you. And these are some great future boot camps, right? So we were getting some questions about the interview and that process. So that's actually our next boot camp. Stay tuned for that. How to research colleges from a distance, another great presentation with a lot of resources. We'll also have a student panel on life at CC. And then finally, what does holistic review really mean? So we're going to do deep dives into each of these areas. So we do encourage you to come along for the whole journey so you get a really full picture of this complete process. And we are here for you to help you throughout this stage. So much so, we even brought our dogs into the mix because Jenna, Melissa, and I, in preparing for this presentation, would start our meetings asking each other about how our dogs were doing. And here they are. So we have joked. We were like, we should incorporate our dogs into this presentation. And then we're like, well, maybe we can put them on the last slide. So it's Lacey, Chuck, Calvin, and Iris that are here to give you some good cheer in this, what can be a daunting process. Know that you have friends, just like the wonderful friends that we have in dogs. We have friends in the admission office, and we have some emails that we want to share with you for carrying on this conversation. So the admission at coloradocollege.edu, that's a really great email because that has, just like a great go-to getting things started general email. If you're not really sure where else to go, we want to make sure we get those questions answered. We talked about financial aid today. That's actually a separate office. So getting directly in touch with the experts there. That's the financial aid at coloradocollege.edu email. And then if you are an international applicant, you have questions specific to the international process. You can also email me because I coordinate international admission for our office as well. So definitely feel free to reach out, and you're all welcome to email me, of course. Even if you are not international, you can always reach out to all of us because we want to be a great resource for you going forward. So with that, my friends, let's turn it over to you. I know the chat has been thriving, so I love seeing all of those questions coming in. And Melissa and Cody are doing a great job. I'm just kind of like chiming in, or every once in a while, just trying to offer some help. But let's turn it over to you all. Do you have some questions that you would like to address? And then I'm going to try to make sure I'll do a sweep. We can do a sweep of the chat as well to make sure we've got, and I can answer a couple of questions live as well if we haven't gotten to them as well.
Megan, can you talk about the difference between test blind and test optional? I did see that question come in. And I thought that'd be a great one to talk through live.
Absolutely. Thank you, Melissa, for reminding me. Yes. So what is the difference? So some schools I think like Hampshire College, maybe one of these schools, and a few other schools have a test blind policy, which means they will not look at scores if you submit them. If you want to try and submit them, they're like, nope, sorry, not going to happen. So why do some schools do that? So some schools really believe so much in moving away from testing that they just go into the test blind policy. Some schools, and CC is one of them, we do test optional because some students who do have the ability to test or have the resources to test or need to test. In some cases, we had required testing in the past for students that were homeschooled or students that were international, but we've lifted those in the test optional environment in the COVID environment. But some schools have kept those. So I think that's another potential dimension for some schools not going test blind and keeping that option in play.
I also saw a really good question about showing involvement, even if it's virtual, and go all of you for still participating in your clubs and volunteering virtually. I think Savannah mentioned that. We still want to see that you're engaged and involved. You know, it's okay to eat your cereal on the couch, but also if you're volunteering your time to sing to the local dogs at the adoption center and via Zoom, right? That's something we want to know about, right? So make sure you're keeping up with those as much as you can. And I also saw a question about the application for Colorado College. So we have our preliminary app that's going to be available probably in July. And since you're probably already on our mailing list, I'm going to assume you all are, since you got this message and you're in this boot camp, you will receive a message about submitting the preliminary app. And it's a really essential part of the process for CC. Not every school has a preliminary app, but many of them do. And if they do, I would encourage you to submit it if you're serious about applying there. It's essentially just going to give us a little more data. Maybe have your parent emails and some information on what majors or programs you're interested in. And then we're able to send you information accordingly, right? So we'll be able to cater to what you're interested in. And we'll be able to help you if you say you're applying early decision, we'll be able to make sure to get you all the information you need by that deadline.
Nice. Thank you, Jenna. It looks like we had a couple more great questions come in. So first one, Alexander, what can you do if you're waitlisted? So great question. What can you do? Well, it depends a little bit from school to school. CC doesn't have any rank or listing for the wait list. So what we'll do is just ask students to opt in is the term we use, and ask them if they want to still be considered on the wait list as we move throughout the process. And many students end up moving on or getting into another school. So we'll sort of have that shrink down a little bit as we progress through our process. You can still engage with us if you're interested. If you weren't able to do an interview before, but you'd like to interview now because you have the ability and the time to, that's also a possibility. It's still keeping in touch with the school and learning more about it and keeping in touch and letting them know that you would like to be actively considered in their waitlist process. And again, every school has a little bit different policy in terms of how they approach that. And then I can take, let's see, the next one. When comparing someone that submits a test score and a very similar applicant that did not submit a test, would you prefer the one with the test? Oh my goodness, that's a great question. Lots of nuance there. I love it. You all are in this. That's great. So we would prefer it. Gosh, it really comes down to the student. So we don't have a preference in terms of, because a student might not test as well. But the most important part is that they have that academic foundation where they showed their effort in the classroom for 4 years. And so we don't compare students and say, well, this student had a score and this student didn't have a score. We were looking just within the context of you and your application, thinking, okay, you didn't submit testing. That's fine. That's why we have a test optional policy. And we look at you within the context of your high school, like we were talking about, the kinds of courses you took, What were the courses that were available for you to take? How did you perform in the more rigorous courses, for instance? And then if a student does have testing, then we look into that too, and we will document that. And I'm like, oh, okay, this student also has testing. If that other student didn't have testing, they're not dinged or like, oh, disadvantaged. Because then we wouldn't want to do test optional policy, because that wouldn't be fair, right? So that's a really great question, because it really does highlight the point that we are indeed truly test optional, and you're not disadvantaged for not submitting scores.
I want to add to that, Megan, there's no point where we're pulling up two apps at the same time and comparing them. We're not looking at you and like, oh, well, this person has a test and this person has more extracurricular, like we're looking at you in your context, and we're not going to directly compare you to another applicant. So just keep that in mind. It's not like a super, competition. It's really just about you and if you fit with the school.
That is a great point. I just wanted to underscore Jenna's point. What does it mean to be deferred? Great question. So sometimes what can happen in an early action or the early decision rounds, if you're applying earlier, if we defer you, we think you could be competitive to be seen again in the regular action process. So we might say, we're not gonna make any conclusive decision right now whether you're going to be admitted or denied, but we'd like to see you again. So we're going to defer your application to see you again in the regular action process. We only do that if we think that you're going to be able to compete academically in that process, because regular action, as Jenna was saying, does have a bit of a decrease in the admit rate, right? So we don't want to string students along if we don't think they have a really good opportunity to be seen again in that context. So we might just deny students for that reason in the earlier rounds, but if we think you can be competitive, we will defer you.
Alexander had a great question. What is the most important thing to know about Colorado College that I wouldn't be able to find online? Cody, I feel like as an alum, you would be a great.
Absolutely.
I'm putting you on the spot, but.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. But yeah, Alexander, to answer your question, the most important thing I would say that you can't find through reading online specifically is finding out more about the community and the people that attend CC. Because I think that to me is one of the things that I thought was great about attending CC. So in that regard, what I would suggest is take advantage of the virtual engagement opportunities that we offer. Like there's general information sessions, there's opportunities to interact one-on-one with a current student, interviewing as well if you've learned a bit more and like want to talk with another student about that. But just, in that regard, take advantage of the virtual opportunities that we now have in order to get to know the community better and decide if CC is a place where you'd like to be.
I would say one thing that I've learned about our students is that, and Cody will tell you because he just graduated last year, they're so overly involved and engaged. Like I get tired when I hear all of the things that they're doing. And I think that's amazing. They're really proactively reaching out. They're in the community, or they're involved in their sport, or they're super involved in their program. And they're already, doing internships. I just feel like our students are so active and, motivated to get out there and achieve their best. So I don't know if that's on our website, but it should be. And Cody's one of them. He's awesome.
I am so impressed by the caliber of these questions. I'm really loving your engagement, everybody. I was just scrolling back to make sure we got everything. And I think there was one Theodore asked about if you get deferred or waitlisted, can you go to ED2? We didn't answer that yet, did we? Okay. All right. Perfect. So great question. So Theodore, if you're deferred, you do have if you say you apply early action or early decision round 1, those are the November deadlines, you can be deferred and opt into early decision 2 because that's a January deadline. And this is actually we did a little policy change on that last year, so it's kind of fun. if you're waitlisted, it's actually too late in the process to then opt into early decision 2 because we make those decisions by mid-February. So if you are waitlisted, unfortunately, you can't opt into an early binding round at that point. So that's a really great point, because if you're thinking about applying early decision round 1 or round 2 to a school, it's definitely advantageous to start thinking about that earlier, right? So you have that opportunity. And then many students will perhaps, like if they apply to an ED1 school and they might not get in, then they can apply to another school ED2. So there are kind of additional binding options depending on your interests and your schools that you would like to apply to.
Just joining us today. You guys are showing interest in CC. You guys are making the next step. So congrats to all of you for being here. We really appreciate your involvement and your amazing questions. Megan, do you have any other final comments or thoughts?
Oh, yes. Thank you so much. So I think we have one more. Let's answer one more question. I got right under the buzzer there, 4:59. Do ED applicants get considered for merit scholarships at the same rate as EA or RD applicants? Yes, you do. And we save them for every round to ensure that they're allocated to students at each round. So great question. And thank you, Melissa, for the link. And if you do have other questions that you'd like to ask us, or if you think about anything later as you percolate over this in the coming days, definitely take advantage of our emails as well, and reach out to us. We'll be happy to answer those questions and stay engaged in the Junior Bootcamp series. There's going to be a lot of great panels and presentations to come. So we are so excited to have you all. Thank you again for your great questions. And we're going to conclude today at 5 o'clock on the button. It's always a miracle when we're able to pull it off with the timing. But we're so glad you're with us today. Stay in touch, stay safe, stay healthy. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.